Hello, happy Sunday. I want to take a moment to share very quickly, briefly, what I shared at church this morning at the Firm Foundation Church as I ministered. Um, every thought that we have, even as a believer, will not be sourced from good, will not be sourced from God. Sometimes those thoughts don't even serve the vision God has given us for our life, or even how God has called us to show up in the earth realm, right? And many times those thoughts are lifted up by our ego or projected by our unresolved issues. And if we give them so much power, those things can begin to grow in us. And so what happens when something grows in you that is not sourced of God and not sourced of good, right? You literally become like a house divided against itself. And so we as mature Christians, we do more than just ignore the thought, but we cast them down and we reject those thoughts and we confess those thoughts to God before allowing those things to double down and to loop on the inside of us. 2 Corinthians 10:5-6, if you would allow me to read it, says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So as a mature Christian, we get to reject, cast down, bring into captivity. We have the power to do that when we have these thoughts that do not serve us or even serve the God that is in us that needs us to show up a certain way in the earth realm. You know, sometimes you hear these thoughts that are do not serve you, do not agree with the good that God says about you, make you feel less than, but just because you heard something in your voice or you heard something does not mean that it is truth, right? You may have heard something, but it may not mean that it is truth. It is sometimes your ego and unresolved issues lifting up things and projecting things for you. But just because you see something on a projector does not mean that it is true. One of the things I'm just reminded us today that sometimes we're so good with others and boundaries, right? If somebody talked down to us, if somebody made us feel less than, we know how to draw the boundaries with other people, but sometimes we're not good when it comes to ourselves. We're not good when it comes to ourselves. When we talk negative to ourselves, we want to allow somebody else say some of the things that we say to ourselves to us, right? We want to allow somebody else to say to us some of the things that we say to ourselves. And so we have to learn how to say, you know what, that thought process, that's not of good, that's not of God, that's not aligned with the vision, that's not aligned with the word of God. So I'm going to confess it right now to God so that it does not build and dwell within me. Jesus said, if your right hand offends you, cut it off, right? And so there are some things that we have to be better about when it comes to ourselves and these things that we hear in our head, because it's not what's outside of a boat that will sink a boat. It's not what's outside of a ship that will sink a ship, but it's what's on the inside. And so just because you heard something in your own voice does not mean that it is the voice of God. You get to discern, but you also get to confess and give over anything out of your body temple that does not align with God or with good or the vision that God has for you and how God has called you to show up in the earth realm. The story of Jairus is one I lifted up this morning when Jairus' daughter, Jairus got there to tell Jesus about his daughter. It was like, she's at the point of death. She had not died, but she died, got the report back from Jairus' house before Jesus could even get there that she had died. And the people that heard Jesus say, oh, she's not dead, she's only sleeping, guess what they did? They laughed. They laughed. But when Jesus got to the house to heal this young lady, he put everybody out of the house except for her mother, her father, and a few of the disciples that he allowed to stay. Why? Because Jesus did not need anybody in the room whose energy or words contradicted what he was about to do. His vision for Jairus' daughter was that she would wake up in a little bit, right? Because she's only sleeping. She's about to get up. And so he put every energy, every person out that did not need to be there, because guess what? Those that were laughing at the vision that he had, they were not in agreement that she would wake up. And sometimes that's what we got to learn to do with these thoughts. It's not other people sometimes that we need to distance ourselves from, people talking down to us. Sometimes we talk down to ourselves in our own voice. And so what God is saying to us today, it matters what you hear your own voice say to you. You've actually been hearing your own voice, yes, before you started to speak. You've actually been hearing your own voice before you started to speak. So sometimes it's not how Pastor Eva encourages you. It's not how your mama encourages you. It's not how your spouse may encourage you, or your daughter or your son may encourage you. But what are you saying to yourself? What are you hearing your own voice say to yourself? And do you have enough discernment? Have you learned and matured enough spiritually to say, you know what? That's not a God thought. That's not a good thought. That is not a thought that aligns with God's vision for my life. So therefore, I'm going to confess it and give it over to God before it builds on the inside of me and it gets momentum and I get in a loop. And then I need somebody else to pull me out of it. And so that's what we talked about today at the Firm Foundation. Yes, we are in a positive thinking movement. It's not just about what you think, but what do you meditate on? What do you allow your mind to meditate on? But if you think an unserving thought long enough, you will begin to meditate on it. And I just want to encourage you today. Don't feel shameful about it. Don't feel, how could I even think that thought? Confess it to God, give it over, get it out of your body temple, get it out of your vessel before it gains momentum. And then, because when it gains its momentum, then it will begin to start exalting itself against God and the God that is in you. This has been Pastor Eva of the Firm Foundation Church right here in Birmingham, Alabama. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.